Hey y'all, this is Jennifer G, the Real Housewife of Texas, and I'm here with my husband Keno, and we're back for another great episode of our relationship show. Um, this topic today is pretty deep and heavy, and I'm going to dive into that into what the topic title is here in a second. But first of all, I want to thank all the listeners out there. Our last episode did really well. It was we got a lot of response. Some people don't necessarily go on the site and respond in public, but we got a lot of responses privately, just thanking us for the information about the topic. It was enjoyable. It was great information, and as a real certified relationship coach, that's something that's important to me. We're not just here having a relationship show where we're just talking about topics of relationships and things involving different types of relationships, but we want to make sure that we're giving out good information. So that's really important to me. So thank you so much for everybody. I mean, every single text, every single private message, which is where most people shared their thank yous and acknowledgments. A couple people said something actually on the site. It doesn't matter to us where you give the feedback at. We appreciate the feedback because again, that lets us know what material that people like and what we need to talk about. So thank you so much for that. Also, we've got a couple of announcements, and I'm going to let Keno chime in here. He's got some announcements that he wants to make before we get started.
So as always, just remember that you can download the episode or stream the episode from Spotify. But if you're looking for the link, you can always check the description. The description, like she always says, is going to show our social media, whether it's Instagram, Facebook. If you want to even check my additional YouTube page, you can go on there. I was going to pull up another little announcement or whatever the case is. But as always, just remember that you can stream us on Spotify if you want to listen to it on the go. That means that it won't be pulling from your YouTube. You don't have to worry about your phone being on or anything like that, or having to continue to have your screen. And as always, please leave comments, questions, and subscribe.
Okay. The topic for today is based on current events. It's called the subject title is toxic and abusive relationships, and it's something that I definitely think needs to be talked about because it is actually a current event right now. I attended a seminar this week because that's another thing that I try to do as a relationship coach is to, because I know I'm no longer, working for dating services. Of course, I'm doing this now independently, but I definitely still like to always educate myself even more on what's going on out there, just so that I make sure that I'm giving great material to the listeners and to people that I might be coaching privately or working with. So I attended a seminar, and it actually was quite interesting that the seminar was about toxic and abusive relationships, and obviously it was that heavy of a subject to where this seminar actually was offered through a healthcare network. So, I found that to be pretty interesting because I'm thinking, wow, if they're offering, this seminar that was no cost, through a healthcare network, then obviously, which, I mean, I know seminars, are offered through healthcare networks and things like that, but the fact that it was free and the fact that it was offered, on a platform to where anybody could tune in, it was eye opening for me that it's clearly something that is needing to be discussed. There needs to be more and more discussions about it. So that's why this one is very important to me. And of course, as usual, as always, one thing that you guys will notice for people that's tuning in just now, or maybe this is the first podcast you've listened to from us. One thing about me is that I try to be a very transparent person. So oftentimes I will use real life experiences that I either experienced, or it may sometimes be experiences that maybe somebody else may have went through, that I'm able to share without, of course, using names or anything like that. But I try to keep things real. That's just who I am as a person, and it's who I am as a professional. So when I coach one-on-one and I work with people, sometimes when people go to therapy sessions and stuff like that, they may feel like they're the only one talking. I know a lot of times, because as a life coach, I refer people to therapists sometimes, because sometimes they're not ready for the part that the life coach plays. Life coaches help the person move forward. So we deal with the what next, or, what are we going to do from here moving forward? That's what we do. And so sometimes I have to refer back to a therapist, because the person may not be ready yet to move forward. Maybe they need to deal with some of the why, So a lot of friends that I have that are actual therapists, they'll tell me that, a lot of times they have to do a lot of the pulling from the people, asking a lot of questions, and of course allowing the people to talk freely. And their work is commendable, because it is difficult work. It's not easy work. And but anyway, so a lot of times I have to refer people back to a therapist, because I realize that they're not ready for the step of a life coach yet. They're actually needing to go through some therapy first. Then they come see somebody like me that would help them to be able to move forward. But sometimes where I'm going with this is that a lot of times when people are working with therapists don't necessarily, they're not there to share their stories with people. They're there for you and to help work with you. So they're very focused on the individual. And so a lot of times they're not going to do very much personal sharing. Well, as a life coach, I have an opportunity to sometimes use examples that I have, when working with people, because, it's a life coach. I mean, you've experienced life, you've been through certain things. And so a lot of times you're able to share pieces or stories, or, things that might be helpful to people. And I think that's why they like working with life coaches, is because, I am able to share experiences and things like that, so that people can see that they're not alone in this journey. So anyway, right now, everybody knows, unless you live under a rock, about the situation with P. Diddy. And, thank God they finally arrested him. And, they have him right now indicted on, I believe, 3 specific charges, federal charges. And I think that because of that situation and what it opened up, there was a lot of there has been a lot of discussion around it, especially when that video leaked. It was one thing for Cassie, the artist, one of his proteges and also longtime girlfriend. It was one thing for people to hear some of the rumors about things that she had experienced and stuff like that by being in a toxic abusive relationship with him. But it was another thing when the footage, the actual footage of him beating her, kicking her in the hallway at a hotel in broad daylight, right there, in front of, I mean, clearly everybody knows that a hotel has cameras. I mean, so that video still just it just is so disturbing, and I think it stays pretty fresh in people's mind. But anyway, so this topic is really heavy, and like I said, I attended this seminar about it, and there were a lot of elements to the things that I even learned to be able to share with you guys. And so I want to talk about some of those things today. So what we're going to kind of do is do something a little bit different, because Keno did not get a chance to attend the seminar. So we are really going to be kind of discussing some of the details of what I learned at the seminar. And he has a lot to offer on the said topic. So we're going to kind of just go through it like that. And that's another thing about us, guys. We do certain things to prepare for these shows or these episodes of the podcast. But there are times like this where we feel it's better to just kind of let it flow, And so, kind of start. So this is going to be, I'm going to go ahead and say it. It's probably going to be a little bit more lengthier of a podcast episode. So I hope that y'all love the information that you're getting to the point where you're going to listen all the way through. Cause I'm telling you, there's a lot of great information in here that I think that anybody can use right now. Toxic and abusive relationships are happening left and right. It's not something, of course, that's new. There were toxic and abusive relationships back in the day. Some people, grandparents, were in toxic and abusive relationships. And unfortunately, that adds to the reason why these things sometimes still occur, because sometimes it's a cycle. It's a cycle that continues. So anyway, this subject is important. It's not to be taken lightly today. It's there, I've had some personal experience of my own that I want to talk about. And, so like I said, just definitely stick with the podcast for this episode, because there's going to be a lot of information in here. And hopefully what my hope is that is information that you can pass on and share, because I got so excited about some of the stuff, the new things that I learned. And, I've got a lot of information because in my coaching studies and stuff like that, I learned a lot in terms of different types of people and, things like that. But there were some new things that I learned that I'm excited about sharing today. And I'm hoping that this information is actually passed on. And, if you know somebody that's in a toxic and abusive relationship, if you are in a toxic and abusive relationship, even if you think you might be in one and you're trying to identify that, today's topic is going to help you. And this is something that everybody can use information from, because somebody definitely knows somebody that's in a toxic and abusive relationship. If you put 10 people on the elevator, at least 4 people out of that 10 people in the elevator is probably experiencing a toxic and abusive relationship in some form. It may be a friend. It may be a family member. It may be a romantic relationship. It could be a boss and employee type of relationship. It could happen anywhere. But anyway, just to kind of start out here. So the seminar that I went to was, his name is Dr. Jamie. And you can find his information in this seminar on Star Network. That's StarNetwork. So you can check it out on starnetwork.com, and you can find this actual seminar that was on toxic and abusive relationships. He is, Dr. Jamie, a trauma therapist. So that's why he even, created this seminar, was because he is a trauma therapist dealing with people who have experienced trauma. He himself was in a toxic and abusive relationship that became kind of codependent. So he actually had to see a therapist, his own self, to recover from being in this type of situation. So that's why he decided that it was important to put this seminar together. And I'm glad he did, because, like I said, right now we're seeing a lot of this happen. We're seeing this on TV. And it's almost like it's getting to be accepted. There was a show that came on the OWN network last season. I think it was called Never Ever Meets. And, it's a reality show where the people were meeting for the first time. They had been talking on, on the internet together, and that they were meeting each other for the first time in person. And the first time in person that they were meeting each other was in this house that they had to, film the show in. And I think one of the first episodes, I don't know if it was episode number 1 or 2, I don't remember, because I stopped watching the thing altogether. But it was like one of the first 1 or 2 episodes, first or second episode or so. One of the couples that met for the first time, their relationship was so toxic that they actually got into a fight that was filmed. And I couldn't even believe they were allowing it to be given a platform to where they were showing it on the show. They didn't cut it out. They didn't edit. They just let it go. And that's eye-opening for me, because what is showing me is that toxic and abusive relationships are happening so much that people are becoming desensitized to it. And you don't want to do that. You don't ever want to get comfortable with being in a toxic and abusive relationship, because it never gets better. It just continues to progress. And sometimes it could end in death. The risk of being in a relationship like that could be very, very high. So one of the things that he mentioned about was that 1 in 8 people are in a toxic or abusive relationship. 1 in 8 people. Or they're recovering from one. So again, it's very prominent. And that's why I'm saying anybody could use information out of today's topic. So nobody is better than the next person, because most people, either you have experienced a toxic or abusive relationship yourself, which in my case I have, in a couple of capacities, and I'm going to talk about that here in a second. Or they know somebody that has been in a toxic or abusive relationship. They may currently be in one. They may have grew up watching a toxic or abusive relationship, because maybe it was their parents, or, an aunt or an uncle or grandparents, so it's happening. There's a couple of key points that he pointed out that I thought was interesting. One of the things that I want to talk about is how to identify, because I think that's the other part to it, is that some people don't even know sometimes if is this relationship toxic, so they're not even able to identify it. So I want to talk about some of the key elements of, how to identify when you're in a toxic relationship. Most toxic people project out toxicity. So most people who are toxic people, typically it's because it's what they're either receiving themselves and they're projecting it out. you know, or somehow or another they're dealing with some toxicity themselves. So what's in you is going to come out. So in the cases that I've seen, a lot of times either they've experienced it themselves and they're projecting out, or you know maybe they were abused or saw some abuse as a child. There's different levels to why people can become toxic, but the main thing about it is that they do project out toxicity, and that's why you have to clear those type of people out of your life, because they will pull you in. These people won't take accountability, so you definitely don't want to sit around waiting for that, you know, I'm sorry, because you may never get it, because a lot of times they don't take accountability. Sometimes either they don't take accountability for what they've done or the toxicness that they are displaying, or they get into these games where they play semantics with you, you know. And what that means is, Dr. Field talks about that a lot. And what that basically means is when they kind of do this wordplay type thing with you, to where, they'll try to flip it and use manipulation. Well, you're trying to tell them what's going on, or maybe explain a situation to them, to where you felt like this is like toxic behavior that they're doing, and then they'll flip it around. Either they act like they don't understand, or they don't see how that was toxic, or they play these semantics with you. They'll get stuck on a piece of it, of the details or something like that, to where it keeps you from being able to explain what you're trying to get out or convey. So that's why, like I said, a lot of times they just won't take accountability, and that's why you can't stick around in those type of relationships, because you're not going to get what you're looking for. And like I said, it's either, if the person is not willing to recognize that they are a toxic person and that they're displaying either toxic or abusive behavior, then they're not going to get any help for it. A lot of times they either they don't know that they're doing it, which most of the time they do. So don't ever fool yourself into thinking either that they don't know, because a lot of times they do. Because a lot of the stuff that they're doing, like the personal insults or weaponizing, it's purposeful. They're doing it on purpose. So, so most of the time they know. So they can't play that game of, but they will do it. They will do it. They will play the game of, oh, I didn't realize, or, just trying to act like they don't see it that way. Or they do the thing where they say, oh, I was just playing with you. I can't even tell you how many people have dealt with that one right there, where they just act like, oh, I was just playing. But so those are some key points that he had mentioned about, as far as the reason that you want to be able to identify who these people are, and then you don't want to stay in these situations. They sometimes find a way to become a victim. So they will flip it on you, and now they're a victim. And so there's so many levels to it, that I mean, I could talk about this subject all day long, because there's just so many levels to what toxic people will do. But I'm gonna let Keno kind of speak a little bit about it here, and insert some of his thoughts too, because there's some other key points I want to get to, but I also want to give him an opportunity to offer what he has to offer about it. But yeah, those are some of the things that I learned in the seminar.
So just to pull your question in, what part did you need me to get my part on Like toxic? What do you?
Well, just your thoughts in general about what I've said so far.
Oh, about people's behavior. So when we get into these conversations about toxicity, relationships that may look or appear to be a certain way in the beginning, everything seems great. Whether it's a friendship, whether it's a relationship, whether even with your parents or a family member or a coworker, you can use any type of scenario just to paint a picture in your mind. So just think about how the initial interactions are always with the pleasantries of how you doing, how's everything going, getting to know people and bringing that in. Now, there are certain people who, when I think about toxicity or toxic relationships, it can be from different forms and fashions. As far as it can, people can come in just with a motive. They can already have something in mind, like how they're going to flip whatever information they end up finding out about you. They may use that as a tactic to gain the upper hand on you. But there's always that facade that people may put up. Like they're not really showing you their true face. They're showing you their public face just to win you over. As far as like being nice and acting cool and everything's great, and then one day you start finding out that these people have been talking about you behind your back, and it could be it could be one of those things where it could take you by surprise. I can say even myself in my personal relationships, I've had people walk out on me, and for the littlest thing, like I wasn't expecting the relationship to end so abruptly. I wasn't looking for things to kind of come to an end with this being the deciding factor, or not even being told as to why. Things just broke off, and I think it was more so I wasn't making the decisions nor the choices that one person wanted. And I'll just use this. I won't say the person's name, but I'll say an old pastor. And we started out with a great relationship. If I'm being transparent, I had such a void in my life because I didn't know my father. So male role, mentor, guidance, kind of the three key elements that a young man needs in order to transition into the world, and he played such a pivotal role in my life in a good way. But I started to notice as I was making the choices or decisions that he didn't agree with, which I didn't know at first because he wasn't making it clear. I wasn't getting any change. But the toxicity part was the control, making me feel almost bad for the choices I made, or trying to make me second guess when I'm a man of my own. The first thing that I noticed that, he took an issue with me dating his daughter. So that was one thing. And I was a teenager. So, I took it with a grain of salt. I was like, oh, respectfully, because, this guy took me in. He looked at me. He acknowledged me in front of the church as his son. He said that out of his own mouth. So I just took it that way. And just so you'll know, to add a little context here, there is no grudge here. There's no bad blood, no animosity. A lot of that's water under the bridge now, because as you get older, you begin to gain wisdom, understanding, and insight into situations as to what it truly was. So then as the relationship progressed, I got married, and I left the church I left the church only because my wife and I had made a mutual decision that this was my church, but we wanted to build something together. So we left together, which was no problem, and I was more than willing to do so because I had already left before. He and I already had some exchanges. I'll say that much. So anyway, where it started to get a little bit toxic was after she and I got married. I noticed that the relationship started to gain a little bit of distance because ever since I was a little boy, even into my teen years, I was very firm in my decision making. My upbringing had no bearings on me sitting around waiting for things to happen. If anything, I got motivated. So as the relationship moved forward, I began to notice the distance only increased more to the point where we stopped talking. And it wasn't like one day we stopped talking. It was an abrupt cutoff, and I kind of felt that it was coming because I could feel like I could feel the distance starting to happen. And then we didn't talk for 8 years, not one word. And to have that happen, what the toxic part for me was the control and the manipulation and making me feel like my choices weren't adequate or up to his standard. And I had to have one of his family members come back and tell me, oh, he just like that. And I said, oh, okay. Well, then that only solidified in my mind I made the right decision. So in this situation, toxic relationship, I'm using this as an example just to point out the relationship doesn't have to be the one with your spouse or the one with your best friend or the one with your family member. It could be somebody even at your job or somebody that you've grown with in your community. And it can leave a bad taste in your mouth, and it can lead you down this road of causing slight confusion because it can mess up your potential faith or your potential walk or your idea about things. Now you're kind of second guessing things, and then you're having to rewire things in your own brain and say, okay, this was just this guy's own situation. This, like, you just have to take that. And this is the big thing that I just wanted to say. And then I can see Jen wants to say her next part is that when situations occur, walk away from it, learn from it, allow yourself to be able to understand where you played a role at, but don't beat yourself up about it. Grow from that situation, which I did. And he and I did end up talking years later and kind of reconcile some things in our own little way. But as they always say, some relationships are for a season, for a reason, for a lifetime. And I felt like he was in my life for a season, and I had to learn that. And that benefited me to be able to walk away in peace.
Let me ask you some questions though about that, because I didn't, like I said, we this one here we're just kind of letting it flow. So I didn't even know that that was a relationship that you. We've talked about this before, but I didn't realize that that was a relationship that you felt was toxic.
As far as the toxicity,
what part? Yeah, you mentioned it just a little bit, but just dive a little bit more into that. What was the control tactics that he was doing that made you feel like this was toxic?
You know how some people will try to give you this. Some people try to give you this space and make you feel like this is a safe space to share, and then you go behind the person's back and make them feel like. Basically, they take the information you just given them that was supposed to be a mutual thing. Like we're just supposed. It's just supposed to be the two of us. Now I'm finding out you telling everybody, and what happened overall is that it began to change people's perspective about you based off of this way. Because you got to remember, when somebody goes and tells information, they're not always going to tell it in a biased way. They're going to tell it in a look at me and look what I had to deal with type of situation. And so the toxic part for me was making me feel a certain way, making me question my own decision making, like leaving, which I knew was the right thing to do. And his behavior afterwards only solidified in my mind, oh, I was doing the right thing, because I was feeling like it was a game of manipulation to string us along or string me along, making me feel like, oh, things are going to kind of change. This is where we're going now. And none of those things happen. So
was he telling you things was going to happen?
Yeah.
To where
it wasn't just me.
He was keeping you around?
Yeah, it was more so not just me, but then other people as well. And so then, as you could see, the numbers started to dwindle, because people started to see how you operate, and they were like, okay, this ain't really what we thought we were going to get. You basically were a salesman with no real pitch. You came up with an idea, but then there was no plan. And so the toxic part for me was just more so the manipulation and using personal stuff and telling it to other people, and then almost like, you don't want to be like this guy, but not saying it. But you know what it is, like them innuendos that we talk about all the time, where people, it was very undermining, and it was almost it was almost diabolical in a sense that the way he moved about it, it was so slithering. Like, it was such a thin little piece that he was sliding in, and it could fool you into thinking, wait a minute, is he talking about me?
And that's what toxic people will do.
Yeah.
Yeah, they will, they play these games of manipulation. I'm going to talk about one of my experiences because years ago, I think I mentioned it on the last episode or the episode before that we talked about, but I previously was in a toxic relationship myself. Thank God, got out of that. It was years ago. And I talked about it in the previous episode, so definitely go back and listen to our previous episode that we did on relationships that you have to heal from, where you have to co-parent, but you need to heal from that relation. The person that you're co-parenting with is the person also that you had to heal from. So if you want more info about that, then just go back and listen to that one, because I'm not here to talk about that today necessarily. Not because I also experience some other levels of toxicity, and I want to show the range of, like what Keno's saying, how sometimes it could be, it may not even necessarily be romantic relationships that are toxic. I just recently had to end a toxic friendship with somebody whom I love a lot. And I actually still love, it's not like you cut your love off for the person. You still love that person. But it got to a point where it was like I had to realize that this is toxic. Like, it's, this situation I continue to be in, to where if you have a relationship with somebody and there's an exchange every now and then where, if you can visualize this, I'm a real visual person. So right now, as I'm trying to explain this, I'm visualizing you poking somebody in the shoulder. Sometimes when you're in a toxic relationship, that's what it feels like. Like, the person is poking you every now and then, because it may not be an everyday thing. It may be something that happens every now and then, but it's still toxic behavior nonetheless. And so over the course of our friendship, I kept experiencing things that was like a poke, and the first couple of times, it happened. I thought to myself, maybe she didn't realize that she is, displaying this kind of behavior, So I realized that I have to sometimes give people grace too, because either maybe I didn't really say it, because I'm really not a confrontational person. So I don't really like to have to face confrontation, but of course it's necessary. And especially, being a life coach, I mean, you're going to have to be working with people. So sometimes you may have to talk about things with people, or pull certain things out, or help them realize things. So there's a level of you having to address things sometimes, and it's necessary. So I'm gonna give you an example of this toxic behavior within a situation that was a real situation that I went through with this person. Um, okay, so one of the things about the both of us is that we're both a lot of fun, and I think that was the initial thing that drew us close together. Is because we were two fun people. When we get together, we're gonna laugh, we're gonna have a good time, we're gonna have some fun. So one time she called me because she wanted me to go to an event with her. Now she had explained to me that we're gonna go. There's this event I want you to go to because these people, I know they'll like you. People, because people do tend. I have a very magnetic personality, and so people do. They I don't really have many problems meeting people or getting to know people. I used to move a lot as a child, because my parents, different reasons that we moved and stuff like that. So I was always used to making friends. So although I don't call everybody my friend, I take my friends, friendships very serious. I mean, clearly, to even be, like I said, in this situation that I'm explaining about, uh, like I said, I take those things very serious. So I'm not light on my friendships because I know I'm a loyal friend. So I expect that same type of behavior, but sometimes you're not going to get that, and it's because people go through different things. And so you can't always expect people to behave like you. And I don't expect that necessarily. Um, but there's a difference between people not behaving like what you would expect and then people just plain being toxic and displaying toxic behavior. So anyway, back to the scenario. um, she asked me to accompany her to this event. She said that these are people that she knows, and they went to a certain place together. I don't, like I said, I just want to share this story, but I'm not trying to, I don't want to include too many details. That's, people start trying to figure out who you're talking about, all that kind of stuff. I'm not here to do that. So anyway, so she knew these people. So we were going to go to this event, and there was going to be, it was a wine event, so there was going to be some drinking involved and stuff like that, which we love to do together. At the time, and by the way, this actually was years ago, but it's also displaying how long I kept dealing with the quote unquote pokes that would happen here and there. So that just ended up becoming a thing. Like it really did. It just kept becoming a thing to a point where it got to a point where even other people started to realize that they're noticing the toxic behavior and they're having to tell me about it. And I'm thinking, this is my friend. So I don't want to think like that about my friend. But anyway, back to the scenario. So I'm like, cool, yeah, I'll go. So, she said, I'll pick you up and everything. And that way, you don't have to drive or anything. And we'll go. It's going to be fun, blah, blah, blah. So, okay. So it's the day of the event. She picks me up. And, clearly when she picks me up, I get in the car. She sees, what I have on. I think I even asked too, like, because I like to make sure that when I go to something, I'm gonna dress for the occasion. I got an outfit for everything, so all you gotta do is give me the theme, and I'm there. I know what I need to put on, how to dress the part, whatever. So she just said it was like a casual wine event, so I figured I'd put something on casual. So what I had on that day, it was in the wintertime, so it was cool outside. So I put on a sweater. I had on some leggings because I love leggings. I liked it when I'm on the weekends and I like to be comfortable. I'm not really a sweatpants wearer, so leggings are my go-to because those are also comfortable, but it's more me. I don't like wearing a lot of baggy stuff and stuff like that. So sweatpants is typically not my go-to thing. But anyway, so Um, and I'm you guys, I'm very detailed, and you will also find that if you continue to listen to our podcast, sometimes too detailed. Sometimes people don't need all that, but I've also been in the acting and things like that. So what I really try to do is illustrate to you these situations that I'm talking about to the best of my ability, like in trying to keep it as short as I can without overdoing the details. Anyway, sweatshirt, leggings, and I had on like some Texan looking boots because we're here in Texas, and so I had on some boots, so like some cowgirl boots with my sweater. So, I'm Aquarius. And Aquarius people like to be eccentric. We like to be different. We wear what we want to wear. We wear what we feel like we want to wear when we get up. We don't really care if anybody else likes it or not. So I had on this outfit, and we go to the event. Now, she sees me when we get in the car. When she picked me up, she sees me get out of the car. She's seeing me at the event. So she's very conscious of what I have on. And at any point, if there was any type of issue with what I had on, she could have told me, right? I mean, this is your friend. So what do friends do? We're going to be honest with each other. And if there was an issue with anything that I had on going to this event where she's going to be, around people that she knows, she had the opportunity to tell me. But this is just going to give you some insight on, like I said, the little tiny little toxic behaviors that, when these things keep happening. That's why I'm saying sometimes people don't even realize that they're in a toxic relationship. And that's what happened to me. I had to come to the realization that this crap is toxic. This type of stuff is happening all the time. So what happened is we get to the event, and just like she said, I'm meeting the people, and the people do like me. We're having a great rapport. We're having a good time. We're drinking wine, laughing. There was going to be some swing out lessons and stuff that was going to be done after the wine thing was over. So it was a fun time, like she said. The first thing that I started to notice was that, and I mean, when I try to go back sometimes and evaluate some of these situations, like I said, I try to make sure I'm not just overthinking stuff, because I do sometimes have the ability to overanalyze. But, there was some things that got to be pretty blatant towards the end here. So anyway, what happened is that I'm noticing that she's kind of feeling some kind of way about me connecting with these people. Now, you brought me to this event because you said these people was going to like me. And, and that was something that one of the reasons that you wanted me to come, because you could have took so many other people that you knew, but you chose to take me. So the people like me all right. And I think what happened is that they like me a little bit too much. So it's like she wanted the people to like me, but not too much. And definitely not to where they seem to be connecting a little bit more with me than maybe her, and the reason I say that is because they just met me. So they were inquisitive about, things that I had to say. They found out I was a relationship coach. So a lot of people had questions about that. And I mean, honestly, me knowing her, I realized that it seemed like she was getting a little bit jealous, because it was like, I wanted the people to like you, but not too much. So it was time to take, somebody mentioned out of their group, let's take a picture. And she was like, yeah, Jen could take the picture, which let me know that she didn't really, she didn't really want me in the picture, which was fine. I mean, because my thing is that these are your people. So, I mean, yeah, sure, I'll take the picture. But it was after the little subtleties of her seeming to be a little bit kind of annoyed in a way that the people like me a little bit too much. Because like I said, I think that was the main issue, was that these people, it was like, I wanted them to like you, but not too much. So, I take the picture, I think somebody even mentioned like, oh, let's let so-and-so take it, or, one of her, I think the lady, one of her kids came through or something, or something like that. If I remember, this was so long ago, so it's hard for me to recall every single detail, but pretty much what I'm trying to say is that there was an opportunity for somebody else to take the picture to where I could be in it. But she made it very plain that, let Jen will take it, So I did. I took the picture, we move on, to the event. We have the people, again, they really like my company and her company too, of course. And so they wanted us to stay even after most of the other people had left. So we stayed after. And of course, this is, I'm not going to lie, we had a lot of wine. So that, that I'm sure that played a factor in some of this situation too. But what we all know about alcohol is that usually if alcohol is involved, typically, what do they say, Keno? What's the sober mind? I always forget that analogy.
Well, the analogy that goes is that two people that are going to tell the truth, those that are drunk and a child, because they won't hold back. Because now you got liquid courage, so ambition, you're a little bit more pumped up. You're more than likely just going to say whatever comes to your mind. Like, if it's been bubbling beneath the surface, it's now finna spew out. Whereas when we're sober-minded and we're clear, we keep our composure.
We think a little bit more about what we're going to say. However, I will say one thing about this friend, or this ex-friend, is that they definitely was a person that was pretty blunt. I mean, so the alcohol didn't do nothing but just make her even more blunt, because it wasn't like she, pretty much held back on things that she wanted to say anyway. So I'm definitely not saying that, because she was a pretty blunt person, but like, saying, alcohol is going to make you, I mean, she was blunt, but she had some tact to the point where she not just going to just say everything, and be all the time uncouth to a point where, when somebody's insulting you, is my point. So we're sitting there, at this point, they're picking my brain, by being a relationship coach, wanting to know, different questions. They had different questions, and, we started talking about some stuff, and she started kind of getting quiet and not really exchanging very much. And it's just kind of, at this point, the friends more so talking with me a little bit more. So out of nowhere, she looks down at my boots that I had on. Now, like I said, mind you, she has seen this entire outfit the whole day that we've been here. And at this point, we have been together for probably, I don't know, let's say 4 or 5 hours at this point. Maybe even longer than that. Because we went, it was like a sun up to sundown thing. We went pretty early, I don't know, 3:00 type thing. And we're not leaving there till 7 or so, or something like that. I mean, so we were there for, for a while, basically. Long enough for you to have seen what I had on. She looks down at my boots and she starts hysterically laughing. And then goes, "Jen, I didn't know you had them long ass boots on," and just laughed and, almost falling to the floor laughing. I mean, just like it was that funny. And to the point where the people kind of was laughing, because they weren't really, I mean, she was laughing so hard. They weren't, they were not knowing that they thinking we laughing with you, not at you, so they start laughing kind of too. Because she's cracking up so hard by herself. Like she's laughing so hard that, how somebody laughs so hard that make you laugh hard, and sometimes you don't even know what you're really laughing at. Well, that's what she did. And, I didn't find it funny at all. And I just looked crazy at her, because I'm like, you trying to, at this point now, you trying to embarrass me in front of these people. My question is why though? Like what reason are you choosing to do this? Because this is not funny. And I'm kind of a no nonsense person like that, to where, especially when it comes to like personal insults and stuff, I don't get into those games when people. I don't really play that game very well. Um, a lot of black people in the black community like doing that, to where, you know, we gonna pick out something about the person, and we gonna laugh it up or whatever, and then we all join in type thing. I'm not with that. I never really was. I don't like playing that game because it's gonna piss me off. And she knew that about me. Like, I mean, I she knew I was the type person that sit up here and like to poke fun really at people like that. That's just not me. I don't really do that like that. Um, so anyway, like I said, my main thing is that I'm recognizing behaviors, and I'm looking at the fact that what happened is that you wanted these people to like me, but you didn't want them to like me too much, and that's what happened. And so to divert the attention away from me, because a lot of people, had a lot of questions, and the attention kind of turned towards me at the moment, because I was, the one being asked questions and stuff. So then she decides to do that to divert the attention elsewhere. And it was just rude. It was rude. And I recognized the what she was doing. So, so anyway, shortly after we leave, we get in the car. It's pretty silent on the way home because I'm really pissed off at this point. And the thing about me, if you listen to my last episode, or our last episode, we talked about low functional behavior versus high functional behavior. And one thing I could definitely say is that I'm a person that has high functional behavior. I'm not just going to react to stuff. I took the time to think about what I wanted to say. I didn't want to address it that night because I know I would have said some pretty harsh things, probably, because I would have been reacting out of being pissed off. So I said I want to just let it kind of marinate tonight, and then we'll address it tomorrow, because I'm definitely going to have a wrap up conversation with her, because typically that's what we would do anyway. It's, kind of recap. But on the way home, she could tell something wasn't right, because, when you done did something deliberate like that, that you've done it, and so, the person pissed off. And, so a lot of times what people do is they'll kind of do these little filler questions and stuff like that to see how you feeling, and, kind of check the temperature. And I felt like that's what she was doing. So the next day I talked to her, and I think she called me to wrap up and see how things, went and what I thought and all that. And like I said, I already knew, no, I know her. And so I already knew that, that was kind of insulting to me. And not kinda, it was. And I had an issue with it. So you knew what the issue was. But either way, if we go, like I said, people that display toxic behavior like this, they do this little game of manipulation where they try to make you think that they don't know. Because, but you can tell when people know what they've done. So anyway, we end up talking about it, and I tell her, I'm like, girl, my problem is that the whole time you saw me, at this party, you knew what I had on and stuff like that, but you wait right good, till we get everybody gathered around, because we're, talking about the relationship stuff and all that. And then you decide that you're going to do something that to me was insulting. And, of course she says, oh, well, the first thing always in these incidents, because this was not, there was multiple incidents like this. These things kept happening. Like I said, the poke, these type of things kept being a thing that would happen. She would do these things, but what she ended up telling me was that she didn't realize that She said, well, yeah, I did laugh, and yeah, I did that. But what she tried to say was that she didn't realize that it was insulting to me. I mean, what would you think when you sit there and start laughing in front of people that I don't know, and stuff like that? Like, come on. But anyway, the manipulation of it all. She acted like she didn't realize that. Then she went on to say that, and we were drinking, so try to throw it in there, blame it on alcohol, kind of thing, And then what she ended up telling me was, I think in this incident, because like I said, there was several more to follow, but I believe in this one, she did say, do me a favor and don't just wait. Or this may be in another incident, because there was, like I said, there was others, but in one of these times where she was doing these things that like I said, poking, she would say, do me this favor to tell me when, like kind of right then and there, if something bothers you. Because what she told me was that it's never my intention to do things to hurt you. That was a lie. And the reason that was a lie is because she has flat out told me before in conversations that we've had about other things that I know that I'm mean. These are her words. I know that I could be mean sometimes on purpose. Like, I know that I do things. And I could give you some examples, but we would be here all night for me to do that. But this is something that she said herself. So this tells me you're aware that you do these little mean things. Toxic behavior. Why would you purposely do mean things to people? But the crazy part about it is that it took me a while to realize that I was part of the people that she would do these mean things to. Like, this stuff was happening to me, and I'm not really, like, I'm noticing it, but I'm not, I guess, fully aware that, because a part of you kind of reasons with it and goes, what friend is going to just do this stuff deliberately? But see, that's where we start to reason with toxicity, and that's what you don't want to do. But the longer you stay in these kind of relationships, that's what you'll start to do. You'll start to make some reasoning out of this type of stuff, this type of behavior, because it's not cool. There's nothing about it that's cool. There's nothing about it that's okay, But the longer you stay in it, the more you start to reason, because like I said, that was one incident out of several others to follow. There was just, always these things that she would either say intentionally or do things intentionally, to try to hurt your feelings. And what the baseline of it all is that I believe that, since I've known her, which was a very lengthy relationship, she has not been in a healthy relationship. And I honestly believe that a lot of that had some significance as to why she would display this toxic behavior to me as a friend. Because when you're, like I said, when you're receiving toxicity, it comes out of you. That's just the way that it works. So what's in you is going to come out. So if you getting toxic behavior done to you, people are insulting you. The people that you're dating or the people that you're with, or if somebody that you were married to, you're being insulted, you're being, demeaned. Things like this is happening to you. So this type of behavior, it'll start to come out of you too. That's why you can't, again, be in a toxic relationship like that, because you're going to start becoming toxic yourself and starting to display some of this stuff. So, we kept going through things like that, and it just got to a point where, and then the other thing that I want to mention too about, because I want to try to the best of my ability, paint the picture so that you guys can understand that it wasn't me just thinking these things in my head. Like, this stuff was happening. Another thing she would do is every time I turned around, when I would introduce her to somebody that I knew, and then sometimes it'd be somebody that she knew, next thing you know, she was always telling me that the person didn't like me. Yeah, I noticed that, you know, like one time we went to an event and it was an event of a friend of mine and we were meeting this person's partner for the first time. Everything's going great, you know. This is a longtime friend of mine and we're meeting the partner for the first time. The party is fun. It's my friend's birthday. I invited her to come with me to it. We get there, you know, everything's going great. You know, everybody's having a great time. People are laughing, you know, no signs that somebody doesn't like me. I mean, you know, people, you know, we're having a good time. Nobody's there for that. We all grown and adults here. When we go to the bathroom, she tells me that, yeah, I saw, you know, the person who, the partner of the friend of mine, I saw him and one of his friends talking about you. And, you know, I just wanted to let you know or whatever. She wanted to do this so bad that she did it at the party. Like, why was it that important to talk about that at that time? And it turned out to not even be true. So why did you do that? Like, you know, this is the type of stuff that kept happening. Every time I turn around, she telling me somebody don't like me. Another friend of mine, she said that about, you know, it was somebody I introduced her to. She went to one of their events. I wasn't there. You know, next thing you know, she's telling me that, you know, the person was talking bad about me, you know, and this and that. I'm not even going to get into the details of it, but basically, you know, that person was talking bad about me. And you know, what I started to realize is that there's a reason for this. Either you just want folks not to like me, or you want me to feel like people don't like me, like almost like dimming your light down a little bit, like bringing you down somewhat, because I've always had pretty good self-esteem and pretty confident about myself. And so on a level, I felt like it was being done to kind of almost make you, you know, say, you know, you're not all that. Why would a friend do that? Toxic behavior, you know? So those types of things kept happening. She even told me, you guys, and this is where I really had to be like, you know what? This stuff is just getting out of hand. She even told me that one of my favorite aunts, after meeting the aunt, didn't like me. My own family, my own aunt, that she's meeting for the first time. She even told me that. And all these events, by the way, I'm telling other people about this that I know, because I'm asking them, what do you make of this? Because I'm trying to make some sense out of why a friend would do these type of things. And it's because it's tripping me out. Like I've never had a friend, because I've always been a pretty good judge of character. And so I don't typically befriend people that are mean spirited, or, you know, I just don't even deal with people like that. So this is the first time in a friendship that I've ever just been around somebody that called themselves my friend, wants me around, but then does this poking that I'm talking about. So again, just examples of toxic behavior. But just to kind of sum everything up, I just got to a point where I realized that I can't keep going. I like this person. There's so many things that I like about this person, but this toxic behavior, I can't do it. I mean, this friendship lasted a very long time, and it's on me. I mean, it's on me, because this friendship should ended a long time ago. Because, you know, one of the things when I told her about, how I felt finally, and just said, I think it's just best that we just go our separate ways type thing, and move on from this friendship. I wanted it to be a light situation. I didn't even want to make a big deal about it, because again, that's just my character. I wasn't trying to tear her down necessarily or anything like that. So I tried to bow out of the friendship in the best way that I could put together to do it. Because like I said, I've never been in this situation where I had a friend who would do this type of stuff to who they call to be a friend. But it just, like I said, it just got to a point of the point where other people were telling me, when I would tell them these different scenarios that would go on, and I would tell it as it happened. Like, I'm not trying to, because when I'm talking to other people about it, or other people that I know, or even somebody that might have been biased at work that don't even know nothing about this person, or barely know two toots about me, just so that I can get an unbiased opinion about it, then people would come to the same conclusion all the time and be like, look, it sounded to me like this girl, she really don't like you. And it tripped me out when my own family members got to the point of saying this. Like, several of my family members told me that. And they know her, because like I said, at this point, we've been friends for a long time. So I've taken her around my family, and that's one thing I don't play about. And that's another reason why I got to a point where I'm like, I can't keep doing this with this person, because I don't play when it comes to my family, and I don't bring people into my family unit that act like that with me. Because if you act like that with me, then you could act like that with one of my family members, and I'm gonna have an issue with that. So, I mean, it got to a point where my family members are telling me, girl, this girl, I mean, seriously, that little boots situation, and other thing, that means that person, they really do not like you. They have you around for a reason, but they seriously don't really care for you. And that was the hard part for me to grasp. That was the part that was like, I couldn't get it. Why would somebody have you around and they don't like you, really? And what I come to the conclusion of is that it may be some things that they may be jealous about. I mean, that's what it's got to be. What other reason would this person do these things? Either that, or it's because they're in a toxic relationship themselves, and it's coming out of them, and maybe because I was the closest person to them, or, one of the closest persons to them, this is the reason that they're spewing the toxicity on you. But, you just got to be careful with that. And anyway, I didn't want to, spend too much more time talking about that. But I just want you to realize, when we're talking about toxic and abusive relationships, it doesn't, like I said, all the time have to be a romantic relationship. You can have a toxic friend. You can have a toxic family member. You can have a toxic coworker. There's different roles that people can play. I want to make a few key points before we get off this topic. And I don't know, we're running out of time, because I don't want to go too long here. But I did tell you guys that this one was going to be a little bit longer than normal. But there's some key points that I want to hit on that I learned in the seminar. One thing that I learned is that when some people that are toxic have experienced some sort of trauma. And one thing I learned about trauma that is very, very interesting to me, because I've never heard this be said, is that trauma is not actually what happens to a person. In times that I've, talked about trauma, or, been in classes that talked about trauma and stuff like that. We took adoption classes a long time ago when we, thought we were going to adopt at one point. I've always learned that trauma, or thought that trauma was something that happens to you. Trauma, actually, said by Dr. Jamie, is something that happens within you. So trauma is actually what gets stirred up afterwards after you've experienced whatever this act is. It's what actually gets stirred up inside of you. So trauma isn't what happens to you, it's what happens within you. So whatever, fear or anxiety, whatever gets stirred up in you from whatever thing you experience, that's actually what trauma is the stir up, the emotional stir that you go through. So that was one of the key points that I thought was really good that he mentioned. He also talked about people that are displaying toxic behavior have three different faces. And this was really interesting. The first face is the one that they show the world. It's what they present. So it's what they want to appear as in the world, which a lot of times is a facade. That's the first face. The second face is who they show to maybe their families and family and friends. So, it's the face that's a little bit more comfortable. I'm showing you a little bit of my true self, with family and friends. But it ain't, there's still a level of facade there too, still. And then the third face is the one that they don't show to anybody. That's the one that they have to look at in the mirror at night. And that's the one that, most of the time people don't see, because that first face that they're going to show is what they want to project out to the world. And it'll have people fooled, and that's why they're able to play the manipulation game with you. And, oh, well, I didn't know you felt like that. Or, I didn't realize that was hurting you, or, the flip that they do. Because the thing about it is, if this person didn't realize that it was hurting you, that's one thing. But when you've told the person that these are the type of antics that really pisses me off, and I don't like when you do these things, and you've said that to them, and they continue to do the poking thing, like I said, that's toxic behavior. That's where the toxicity comes in at. Another key thing that he talked about was how, and this is another part that I want you to chime in on, Keno, because I think you have some insight on this. He talked about how there's what's called complex PTSD. Complex PTSD is where, because PTSD, of course, is post-traumatic stress disorder. Post-traumatic stress disorder. So complex PTSD is where the last 10 years of your life triggers the future 10 years of your life. So events that you may have went through in the past now are triggering what is happening in the future. And I thought that was interesting. That was really insightful. Because what reason why he even brought that up is because he was saying a lot of people that are toxic, that may be why you're seeing this toxicity. If they experience toxic behavior themselves, like let's say it's somebody that was bullied as a child by their parent, so for the last 10 years of their life, they've been bullied, again, what's in you is going to come out. So now they are the bully. So they're projecting this toxic behavior on somebody else. So this is where the future, 10 years is getting triggered by what they've been through in the past. And I think Keno can offer some stuff about that.
So over the years, I have a tendency. It's funny that she says a decade or 10 years. I have a tendency to always look back at how I operated in my teen years, in my 20s, my 30s, and now my 40s, on my way to my 50s. And it's funny that she talks about to me, not a funny ha ha ha, but it's funny like epiphany type thing where it's enlightening to understand that the things, like we always talk about, the things that happened in your childhood shaped who you became or you would become in your adulthood. Now, what you have to do is you have to stop and say, okay, how am I operating from those things that were traumatic in my childhood? How is it allowing me to communicate? How is it allowing me to operate or function with others? How do I treat others? How do I work in society? How do I function at my job or at my home or with my friends or at my church or wherever I may be, gatherings, or just even normal conversations around the, around the fountain, whatever they like to say, the cooling water, whatever.
Water cooler.
Water cooler. Thank you. I haven't been in the office in a while, so that whole nuance and talking about that is gone. What I begin to learn is that because of the environment I grew up in, yes, I did develop and was diagnosed with PTSD, and the therapist at the time didn't say complex, but I believe that because most of the complex comes in where it becomes complex PTSD, it usually a child experiencing something traumatic. And like she said, it's not about more so what happened, is how it affected you on the inside and how you're now operating. So I'll give an example. I believe it was around the age of 6 or 7. My cousin and I were getting ready to walk across the street. And I looked both ways. We always were taught as kids, look both ways before you cross the street. You know how the phrase goes. So I did that. And so did he. I crossed the street, got across the street just fine. He looked both ways and then he looked left again and he crossed the street. Well, this lady was speeding and she hit him. And he got drugged under the car by under his chin, and it burned all the skin off of his body. Now, granted, he got rushed to Children's Hospital. He was only like 6, 7 years old at the time because he and I are only 10 days apart. He healed in probably about 2, 3 weeks, which was like, oh my God, I've never seen where you could see, not to be too graphic, but yes, I'm just going to say his skin was burned off. And they had him bandaged up. That alone affected me in different ways, but I wasn't ready to process that. So I just went into action. I've always kind of been, they say fight or flight, and I was just ready to do whatever needed to be done. So the first thing I did, because this is the 80s, mind you, this is probably, what did I said? We're probably 6 years old. This had to be like 84, 85. So a lot of people don't have home telephones. We have pay phones. So if you're trying to reach the next person, you probably got to go to their house. So I run upstairs. I tell my mother and she's like, oh, well, you got to go tell grandma. Grandma lives a few blocks away, probably about 5-minute, 10-minute walk. I run to her house because all I can think is, oh my God, I hope he's okay. Oh my God, I hope he's okay. Of course, meanwhile, ambulance, fire department, all that, is coming. I go and tell grandma. I run to her house with every speed, amount of speed that I had as a little boy. But all that time, I'm just thinking, we got to tell Aunt Debbie, or we got to tell my aunt, or whatever. I didn't mean to disclose her name. Anyway, so I say all that to say this is that I was so busy going into action that I didn't have time to react. And nobody ever asked me. We actually recently had this conversation. We've had this conversation. But every time we have this conversation, it's like I walk away with something else or she walks away with something a little bit more insightful. Because the thing about it was the next day I went to school. I mean, it wasn't like it didn't happen, but it wasn't stopping me from getting up and going to school. So as I'm sitting here having this conversation now, I even think about when something traumatic happens to me, I learned something that day that you still continue to operate. You still continue to go to work. You still continue. And I had to learn that that wasn't always a good thing because you haven't really given yourself a chance to process everything. So I've had many other traumatic experiences, but that's the first one that was really big because I was so little and so was he. And he and I may have talked about it once over the 40 plus years that we've been on this earth. And but yeah, I think that when it comes to post traumatic stress or complex post traumatic stress, learning and understanding how it affects you, like she said, if we're looking at the 10 years down the road, it's
that's what I was going to ask you. So future 10 years, how does
so
that
the
affect
future 10 years, I became a little bit more destructive because at that point, other things had happened. Other things, if we fast forward to being a teenager, 15, 16 years old, I'm more destructive. My behavior is more impulsive because now I've had other things happen. My environment's changed. I'm seeing people act in a manner or a way that is more detrimental. I'm in questionable environments where my likelihood, my protection is all up for grabs. Like where you can clearly peer into somebody else's window and say, "Oh, this is how things should go. This is how things are going in my house." I'm seeing things, I'm seeing violence, I'm seeing folks treat, act, and operate in certain ways that are not good. So 10 years forward, we go another 10 years forward. I'm now 25, 26. I'm a little bit more, less likely to be nice to people. I'm reacting instead of processing. So a few years prior to that, I went to anger management therapy and it helped. But it's like if we continue to go down this 10-year cycle, I had to learn how to say, okay, I don't want to operate like I did it as a child or as a teenager or as I did in my mid-20s or I did in my mid-30s. And now I'm in my mid-40s, I can look back over that time and realize as those 10 years started to progress, I was able to change a lot of the things that I was doing, how I was operating, how I was treating people, how I would talk to people, how I would function in society because I became self-aware.
Yeah. And it's so true. And that's what like I said, just kind of relating to the story I was telling about the friend, the toxic friend, that's what I believe was part of, her issue is that all these toxic relationships you've been in, now you're starting to kind of spew out what you're getting. And so again, that's why you just have to get out of those relationships. Don't, one of the things that the doctor kept stressing is don't make room for these types of people in your life. And that's what I kept doing, making room each year for her, with showing this kind of behavior. Like I said, to the point where other people were starting to tell me that this is not a friend. A friend wouldn't treat you like this. And if it was a situation where it was like a one-off thing that happened, you show a little grace, And I mean, especially if y'all talked about it and they know now clearly where your boundaries are and what you're going to deal with and not, then the behavior should stop. But it kept happening. The pokes kept happening, whether it be something she would say that was insulting or, something she would do, like the whole laughing situation and just being, blatant, just sitting there doing that on purpose. You knew you were very intentional about why you did that. And then all these excuses is what would come afterwards as far as, oh, it might have been too much to drink or, you can't keep leaning on that. It's like, the person over time, if you stay in relationships that are toxic like that, you're going to experience what's called burnout. And you're going to get to a point where you get burned out and you're gonna either blow up on the person or and or it's either gonna get worse, the whole situation, or if leave the relationship and cut it off, then you'll have time to heal and things like that, because you do have to heal from these situations, because this is a loss either way. This is somebody you cared a great deal for. You couldn't understand why this person is treating you this way when you are the one of the few people that's actually loyal to this person. Would do anything for them if they called you and needed you. So you can't process why somebody would treat you this way. And I found myself, like, people would ask me all the time, like, why are you still friends with her? Like, after that whole situation you just explained and several others, there's no way I would even still continue to deal with that person. Well, you just keep reasoning with it. Which brings me to one of the last few points I want to make before we close here. In toxic behavior or relationships, there's a cycle that happens. The relationship that I saw her be in just even recently, I don't know if she's still in it, because like I said, I got to a point where we started creating some distance, and it just become more and more distant. So I don't even know if she in this relationship or not still, but she was in a very toxic and abusive relationship, and I told her so. We had very, clear conversation about it. But the cycle that happens in these relationships, and this is what keeps people being in a toxic relationship sometimes, is the fact that there is the abuse, whether it be emotional, verbally, physical, and then there's the reward. Abuse, reward. Abuse, reward. What that means is that they do a toxic behavior to you. Something that, don't make you feel good. They insult you or, demean you. They do something intentional that hurts your feelings or hurts you. And it's intentional. They have a motive behind why they're doing it. They do that, and then they turn around and there's a reward. Now we're going to go on an extravagant vacation together, or now we're going to, have a elegant dinner together or something like that. There's a reward that happens, and that's them basically reeling you back in after they have done the toxic behavior to you. Kind of like what Keno was talking about, in his scenario, the manipulation of it all. Knowing that they doing certain things that's kind of spiteful, it's not cool, but then they got to keep you there, so they reel you back in. Well, that's what would happen to me, and that's what I seen happen to her in these toxic relationships that she was in. There's the abuse and reward. When I was in a toxic relationship, the same thing happened. That's why I'm able to identify it. I've been in one myself before. You're able to identify it, because when you done been through it yourself, you can identify it, and that's why I had to get out. I didn't stick around too long with that relationship. I realized what it was. I knew I had good self-esteem, and I'm like, I'm not about to stick around to where, because if you stay in it, then it will start to work on your self-esteem. And next thing you know, you lower than dirt, and you could barely pick yourself up or your face or anything else, and then it don't give you the strength to be able to move on. You still function within that cycle of abuse and reward, and so that's why you have got to get out of those situations. One of the last points I want to talk about is, so if you are in a toxic relationship, there are going to be stages like peeling an onion that you go through. The first stage is you being aware of it. And that's what I had to do. First of all, become aware that, you know what, this is actually toxic behavior. Because sometimes you don't even realize it for what it is. Like you don't even realize this is toxic. So you have to become aware of it first of all. Then number two, Dr. Jamie mentioned is that you share your story, because that kind of helps you to, I guess, more if you, more so if you talk about it, after you become aware of it, then it kind of keeps that fresh in your mind of, this is what that type of behavior looks like. So it's good to, talk about it so that you can get it out. Number three was gaining insight from it. So now you're able to kind of sit back and reflect, like when this began to be toxic, where the breakdown happened. You start to gain insight from what you went through. Because like I said, this was a long relationship. So I realized this is, it was hard to undo, because, you when you become aware of it, then it's like, dang, I've been dealing with this type of behavior, and I've been trying to be a good friend and like know that she's going through some stuff. So you kind of make excuses for it in a sense. Then it got to a point where it's like, okay, well, now I'm having conversations with you to give you the opportunity to know, giving you a little grace, knowing, telling you that this is the type of behavior that I'm not liking in this friendship. But these poking situations continue to happen. And then what it ends up happening is that you develop a little resentment if you stay in those relationships. And I thought about, like, my grandma used to always say, some people you just have to handle with a long handled spoon. But it got to a point in that relationship where I was like, why am I even handling the person at all? Like, if you don't mean me any well and you keep doing behaviors like this to me, and I'm supposed to be somebody you love and supposed to be somebody that's your friend, and like I said, it's so bad and so obvious to other people that they're telling me, like, that ain't your friend, then, what am I sticking around for? What's there? So, and you definitely don't want to get caught up in that, because a lot of people get caught up in that too, like the longevity of it all. Well, we've been friends for a long time, or we've been in a relationship for a long time, so I got to fight at this thing. No. If there's no substance to it any longer, or if you are in this toxic or abusive relationship situation, you don't need to reason with it and say, "Oh, I'm gonna start being friends," or not friends, but I'm gonna continue to stay in this situation because of the longevity of it all. You have to get out of those situations. Put up your boundaries. Cut that relationship off. If it's meant to be, it'll come back, but that there would have to be some great change that would happen in order for that, to be accomplished. Most of the time though, it just, it fizzles out, and that's what needed to happen. And that's just what it is. So, anyway, I hope you guys have enjoyed this topic. Like I said, I could talk about it because there's so many elements to it, and there's so much more that I, didn't even get a chance to really go through and share. So I may do a part 2 on this topic. But like always, thank you guys for listening. I really appreciate it. Let us know what you think. Let us know what your thoughts are. I'm going to list on the community page on YouTube some information about that I mentioned in the beginning of where you can find this information in this seminar that I went to, and some of these behaviors, and list that. So I'll make sure I share that on our community page. But share this information with a friend. If you learn any piece of anything today, share it with somebody, because we got to get out of these types of relationships. The more and more the world turns and changes, and The years evolve. These types of relationships, people are getting desensitized to it. And so they are staying in relationships like this. Like I said, whether it's a family member or it's a friend or it's a romantic relationship, people are making room for the toxicity. And you can't do that because it will corrupt you as a person. And that's what I had to realize. Like, I got to get out of this relationship before I start becoming the toxic person, you know. But thank you so much for listening. We did, Keno's got an announcement that he's going to do. Well, actually, you know what? We ran out of time, so we just won't do it this time. But we thank you so much for listening, and like, share, subscribe, give us comments, give us feedback, let us know what you think. Look at the information on the community page if you want to share it with anybody. I'm also going to share like the National Abuse Hotline, because if you know anybody that is in a abusive relationship and you want to give an anonymous tip about that, you can do that. Be that intrusive friend. Sometimes you get, you get the lashback or what do you call it? You get the repercussions of you being the person that was being intrusive because you love this person and you're trying to, let them know, wake up, be that person. Because a lot of times in some of these relationships that are, the abusive side of it all, some people, sometimes it ends in death. I watched several shows, on these crime stories and stuff like that, where these relationships people have stayed in it so long that it's just gotten out of hand and it ends up in death, So you can't fool around with this stuff, guys. If you see somebody that's in a toxic relationship, let your friend know. If she don't like you after it's over, just because you're not supporting her toxic and abusive relationship, let that be that. That's fine. But I'm not going to be the one that doesn't say anything about it. But anyway, thank you so much for listening. I hope you enjoyed it, the topic today, and, continue listening and continue giving feedback, because again, we want to make it great. And peace be with you.